The University of Cape Town's Children's Institute has described the recent medium-term budget policy statement as short-sighted. It says that austerity measures should not affect social spending and wants future increases to match inflation. This as government is struggling to balance the books with spending exceeding revenue. Let's speak now to the Children's Institute's Lucy Jamieson. A very good evening to you, Lucy. Thank you so much for your time. You're joining us from Cape Town tonight. Explain where you felt that the budget, basically, as presented by the Finance Minister, fell short of social spending.
So let's go back to that first point, that actually if we want the economy to grow over time, we need to invest in children. Children are going to provide the workforce for tomorrow. Economic growth is dependent on us making sure that our children reach their full potential. And what we're seeing in the latest budget speech is that we are actually cutting the spending. Actually, real terms, we are seeing smaller allocations across health, education, grants, critically ECD. So all of those services, and children are often a soft target, but if we want children to be able to reach their full potential, we need to invest in their health. We need to invest in their education. We need to make sure that they are not growing up hungry. At the moment, we have seen persistently that over 27% of children by the age of 5 are stunted. That has a huge impact on their ability to grow and their ability to learn. And what we're seeing from the Treasury at the moment is less money going into people's pockets in grants and less money going into services. Yes, there's a nominal increase, but overall, all government departments are going to have to be cutting their services.
And you say in your note that you've issued basically that the medium-term budget statement does not address, you say, child hunger and rising poverty. You then say nearly 8 million children in this country live below the food poverty line. That is the minimum cost of food for survival. And the poverty line in this country is 760 rand. In this country, you also have a worsening situation where you've got the children who are poor but are fortunate enough to have a guardian. But you then have a large part of the population where many of these children are left to fend for themselves.
So, I mean, most children are supported by family members. It may not be a parent per se, but there usually are adults in children's lives. The number of children who are left to fend on their own is very small. But families across the board are struggling. And what we've seen is that the child support grant was originally introduced in order to ensure that children didn't go hungry. Over the years, because it suffered from these below inflation increases, the value of that grant in terms of how much money, what that money can buy has decreased. So there's a widening gap between the child support grant and the food poverty line. So every year it's falling further and further below that food poverty line, which is why we're seeing child hunger and indeed child stunting persistent so much. And there are other measures, to support families. So we're very grateful that the social relief of distress, what people know as the COVID grant, has been continued. That's a great help to families. But again, if it doesn't increase in line with even headline inflation, people can buy less with that. And what we're seeing at the moment is that, these grant increases are below what's called headline inflation. But food inflation is well above that. It's about double the value of headline inflation. So in real terms, we're getting further and further away from meeting that goal of ending child poverty.
Mm-hmm. And with that in mind, you've warning of the long-term disadvantages or risks that come with the levels of austerity in government budgets, the issue of a rise in unemployment, a rise in poverty in this country. How do you see it affecting South Africa in the longer term? Because there's very little to no progress being made in closing that inequality gap?
So, and as I said at the beginning, what we have to understand is that if we want to close those gaps, if we want to ensure that South Africa is able to be competitive in the longer term, we need to ensure that our children are well able to achieve their full potential. So they need to be educated. We need to be bringing them out of poverty. And across all of those indicators, we are doing a disservice to children. We're not investing. We haven't caught up from the backslide that we had in terms of educational performance under COVID. That cost us 10 years of investment. So we really need to think sometimes, it's not like a bank account where you can, we need to cut back today, but we can catch up tomorrow. Once a child has suffered from stunting, that's pretty much irreversible. So whilst we have to be careful, we have to be cautious, the one thing that we cannot cut back on is investment in our children and the services that support them.
Is there a way in which government could have drawn up the budget differently? Because it has said, the finance minister had been warning for months, in fact, that difficult decisions would have to be made. Social spending is not the only area where government has had to pull back spending. In fact, even trade unions are fighting another battle where, in fact, they're expecting freezes on new jobs, infrastructure spend, etc.
So, I'm not an economist. I'm a child rights advocate. But, there has been a lot of debate amongst the economists about whether or not we are in the desperate situation that government has portrayed. So many economists have said that we're at the fiscal cliff that government is talking about is not real, and that we can actually, if we are investing wisely, if we are spending money on social services, if we are looking at the ways in which government has access to surpluses from exchange rate trades, then we could be looking at a different budget. But as I said, I'm not an economist, I'm a child rights advocate, and the thing that we do know is that it's when it comes to the cuts that need to be made in terms of services at the provincial level, what we see is that government has to, it's got certain obligations. It needs to continue to pay its staff and its workforce, and so it has to cut programs. And which programs typically get first are the ones that are going to children. They're a soft target. So we are worried about not just this round of the National Treasury's allocations, but what happens next. So we are urging all of those provinces, when they're looking at the reallocations that they have to do, to protect that spending for priority children's services.
Lucy Jamieson from the UCT Children's Institute, a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you so much for your time tonight.